No, one more. 1227.
Well, good.
Legislative committee, you gotta like.
6 o'clock, you're good to go.
Very fun.
Okay, we'll call the Finance Human Resource Committee meeting to order. It's 6 o'clock, 6 p.m. Councilmember Mark Davies.
Here.
Councilmember Scott Harrington.
Yes, here.
Councilmember John Rafford.
Here.
Any additions, corrections, needs to the minutes provided for the November 29th? Hearing none, accept the minutes as provided. Topic A.
So the Consell Well Water Transmission Line project is now complete. We're in the process of closing that project out. And one of the final steps is to approve a change order, which will adjust the final quantities based on the bid prices to reflect what was actually done. There are a few minor adjustments in the field that need to be made. We added some more straps to tie down the pipe and a few reconfigurations slightly at the ends that resulted in an increase of $15,248.60.
How much was it, Greg?
Just over $15,200.
Thank you.
The total project budget was set at $370,000. This would bring the total project cost of $380,687.30. So we're just over $10,600 over budget by that amount.
What was your contingency for the budget for the project?
We had, I think the original project's award was somewhere in the $350,000 range, and then we had set a budget for $370,000.
So $20,000 contingency normal for that size project?
Yeah.
Well, there was engineering costs and construction costs in that budget.
Right, the engineering was done in-house, so there was external engineering cost. Yeah, that's about typical.
So
Well, 10% would have been $39,000.
Yeah, I mean, 10% would be the max that we would probably see on a construction. Sometimes just 5.
Any other further questions, concerns? Hearing none. Topic B.
Okay, winter decorations for city gateways. We discussed this a couple of finance meetings ago. We then discussed it at the planning committee meeting. I think the consensus was that we wanted to look, originally it came from a question from Councilmember Harrington regarding reestablishing the holiday winter decoration gateway at River Street. We had talked about establishing that at each of the city's gateways or several of them. River Street, Main Street, near exit 14, Main Street at the east end, and Chestnut Street at the west end. We looked into that. The cost was a bit steep for installing the skyline style, bringing something across the street. One of the suggestions that came from Judy Payman actually at the last planning committee meeting was to look at putting something the same style snowflakes that we have downtown at each of those locations, maybe a little bit bigger in size. So we looked at that. We actually figured out a way we could fund this project through the NIPA project that's ongoing with some of the money we have left in that project. So if we did that, these costs would be financed through that project. So it wouldn't be a budget transfer. Obviously, it's still a cost of the city and we'd be paying interest on that cost. To install 4 snowflakes in a row at each of the poles that has street lights on them at each of these locations, that's how we would have to do it. Basically plugging these into the power source that's half off the street lights. That's something we can do with the lights we have. So if you can imagine on River Street, for example, if you turn off of Bridge Ave onto River Street, you can see the first 4 street lights would also have a snowflake attached to those poles. We picked 4 because we think with snowflakes that makes a little bit more of an impression than just having 1 or 2. Because it's not quite the same as having the light straight across the street. So that's what we came up with. We can do that at 3 of those locations: River Street, Main Street on the east end, and Chestnut Street at the west end. We can't do that on Main Street by exit 14 just due to the pole design without more additional costs and alterations. We think that's something that we can do in the future for the future streetscape project that we may do down there. It's certainly not something that's budgeted or coming up soon, but it's So the total cost for those 3 locations would be around $8,500 plus or minus, this amount where we visit each part. $530 per snowflake, 4 snowflakes per location, 3 locations, and then $150 roughly to install power connectors. That's some additional part of it.
And the fund that you're gonna pull from is what, right?
So NIPA, New Power Authority, our project, our streetlight upgrade project, which includes some smart cities technology installation, we confirm with them this would be an eligible cost in that, so we could add this to that project, and then it wouldn't be coming out of the city's pocket at this time. Obviously, we would be paying this back over time with interest as part of that finance project. An option as opposed to having to transfer money from. Yet to be determined source, if that's what we wanted to pay for it now, Jay and I would have to go look and see where that might come from. Unfortunately, lead times being what they are, we would not be seeing these snowflakes until August. We're not talking, there's no need to make an immediate decision on August, because unfortunately, we're not going to see them this year. However, with the NIPA project wrapping up relatively soon, they're finishing the punch list on some of those street lighting things. They would be able to install power connectors now while they're, next time they're in town. So we would like to, if we're going to move forward soon, probably the next council meeting.
What does the committee think? Basically, it's 4 snowflakes at 3 locations.
I'm for it. I accept.
Just a little mixed feelings in terms of,
Yeah.
85 means it's 10,000, 10,500 by the time that we've actually paid it off, but I think, in the interest of trying to beautify our entrances, at least during the winter time. I'm certainly supportive of going to full council for discussion there.
That item up to full council.
I suggest that we discussion. Is that what you prefer? Or?
Consensus?
Consent. Okay.
Someone pulls it forward. Huh? What's that?
I go now.
No, I mean, just, right, and then it's open to discussion at that point, so we'll have to think about it.
Yeah, sure.
Topic C.
Defer Dave, you want to explain what we're talking about here?
Well, OPT has been looking at a plan over the last couple months to do a route consolidation. We'd like to take 2 routes and make it 1, and then incorporate another run into the Cooperstown run. So we would be taking River Street and incorporating it with West. And then the east end would be serviced by the Cooperstown bus. This would allow us to use less employees, 1 less bus, still cover the same amount of service area. It would decrease the amount of the frequency of rides to the west end. But we've been doing, some route studies, and that is our lowest used route at the time. We don't see where there's a lot of use there. We still would be meeting all of our contractual obligations as far as amount of rides to, for the town, for Fox, and for everyone else that we service. We'd like to start this the 10th of January, which would give us a little bit of lead time before college is back in session, so we can work out the bugs. I really feel it's going to help us immensely as far as covering the routes that we're currently doing, because let's face it, we're running these guys hard, the drivers. This would allow us actually 2 positions a day that we wouldn't have to fill. 2, that would be 12.5 hours. Ginny, she's done some, the financial end of it, and I'll let her speak on that.
Yeah, as David mentioned, we'll take about 12 to 13 hours a day off of our payroll costs, which just roughly between payroll and fringe benefits, about $73,000 in costs that we would be saving. We would be losing STOA mileage, which would be about $23,000 in reduced state aid. So we would have a net savings of about $50,000 a year.
Any questions? Mark?
So, David, thanks. Like I said, the principal, just trying to understand how much would reduce the west end. I mean, so it's still gonna have coverage, but what will be the frequency of?
It would be once, instead of every half hour, it'd be once an hour.
Okay.
So we would be going from roughly 22 rides, trips out there to 11.
And you said that's your most underutilized.
It is. We do have connecting routes to Otsego Express, but we'll be servicing them off of the River Street route. Well, I should say we'll be, in the morning, it'll be serviced off the west, and in the afternoon, it'll be serviced off the river. So we'll still be able to meet all of the connecting routes.
Is there a high time there? Is there like a commuter time that uses that?
I would say that we pick up probably 3 people on the commuter route in the morning, which that won't change because we do the commuter route as early. Those people usually transfer to Cooperstown to go to Bassett. So that won't change a bit because that is serviced at 6:30 in the morning. Or, well, it starts at 6, but they get out there about 6:30. And then they connect to the Cooperstown bus at 7. So that won't change a bit. The biggest user is Brown Street. So we go to Brown Street with some people that work out there. We'll still be servicing that at the 7:30 and 3 o'clock hour. So we've made the route so we can do it. We've done a lot of route studies. We've actually done mock runs, and it works. So,
Well, thanks. I mean, it sounds like you thought of everything and.
well, let's hope so. I'm sure there's going to be growing pains. There's going to be adjustments. Excuse me? Yeah, I mean, we're going to have to.
Yeah, Dave had just mentioned before to me specifically, he wanted to be really heavy on the public messaging about this to be sure, providing the council agreed with the change, that we would be getting notification out to the public as soon as possible and with some frequency so that way people could plan. So I just want to make sure you mentioned that part. He really did think of everything.
I don't know about that.
So approximately, how many folks do you think you're gonna affect on this?
I'm sorry.
So approximately, how many folks do you think you're gonna change on this?
Handful.
Any other
I
questions?
mean, there is going to be people that have needs that are going to have to change, but I think it's for the better.
Any further questions?
Does this affect, when you go for your buses and stuff from state aid and federal aid?
No, that 26,000 miles or whatever, not even 26 of this, it's not going to affect us now.
The full council, topic D.
Okay, so city prosecutor appointment, our current city prosecutor, Bob Goulden, will become the elected city judge after a year. So we've been in the process of trying to identify a new city prosecutor to appoint. Our current part-time city judge, Don Schwartz, has agreed to become the new prosecutor. To be a part-time employee to the city, will be effective 1st of January. And the cost would be essentially the same as it has been, which equates to around $60,000 per year.
John. Scott. With that, I don't know the council.
So, Katie, this will not be this will be a higher end appointment, how will we?
No. Mayor points, right?
Well, he's gonna be an employee.
So I would just imagine wording the motion that the council approves the mayor's appointment of this individual, and then we would indicate the terms of employment in the motion, providing.
Which is the way we did it with Mike Getman, so it's just
Yes.
going back to the way we did it.
Yes, sir, correct.
And it's the appointment is 1 year at a time, I imagine.
Yes, sir.
So then I guess I misunderstood. I thought that we were just appointing, this was an outsourcing of service.
No, this person is being hired as an employee, and that's based on the preference of both the individual as well as the district attorney's office, based on some concerns about liability. We have no objections to the arrangement. It's cost neutral for the city.
Do you?
Yes, I support the arrangement. My preference would be to have a contract, but considering the DA's considerations, we can make it work. And his pay will be based on a daily rate, and there won't be any supervision or anything like that. He'll be a freestanding, basically part-time employee.
Clarify one thing.
We're paying health benefits.
No, we're
No,
not.
we're not.
Part-time employee, so there's no health insurance and there's no retirement benefits provided.
And the reason, the good thing about this is that the DA will also appoint him as an assistant DA, which allows him to prosecute felonies because our city prosecutor cannot prosecute felonies. That's the arrangement we had with Mike Getman. Now, the DA, though, is not comfortable with appointing an assistant DA as an outside consultant. So that conflicts with his needs and his requirements somehow. That exactly what I'm saying. Because he's going to appoint him as an ADA, which is important to us, one of his requirements is that he works as a city employee without an outside consultant. I forget all of the reasons why, but it doesn't hurt us, and it's good for us to have him appointed as an ADA and meets the DA's requirement.
So the number is 60.
The number is 60 between, and we'll be allocating that. We'll have to do a budget transfer between salary or purchase services. We'll need to move it to the salary line and the FICA line, but we're going to have it just between the 60,000 just reallocated.
Okay.
And as Katie said, there's no retirement cost and there's no health insurance cost.
And so Bob had his own office. So are we providing him an office? Does he have his own office somewhere else, or?
If needed, he said he would likely use an office at public safety building. I talked with Chris Christopher, whether that's in the police station or in the core area. I would work. We also have office space available at City Hall that if he needed, it would be indicated to me that probably would not utilize that.
And then we supply Bob with a computer, if I remember correctly.
Don said
He won't be using,
he won't be using a computer provided by the city.
because I didn't give a computer or a laptop or a printer or something.
Here's what else changes, is that when Bob was the city prosecutor, he could not access the software system that the DA uses for discoveries and transmitting the evidence to the defense attorney and the courts and all of that. Bob is going to, as a DA, because Don is also going to be an ADA, he's going to be allowed to use the county DA's software system, which makes the job much less time consuming, much more efficient, able to meet the required deadlines for getting the discovery evidence to the defense attorney. And it relieves the need for additional computers and software that Bob needed because Bob was not appointed as an ADA. He was not able to access that software. Okay. So this is really all in all a win-win for us.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, Mary. I think it's an excellent arrangement.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll move that up to full council. Topic E.
So this police sergeant, when you recall, we just appointed a sergeant, which was backfill a vacancy that was created by the previous appointment of the new lieutenant. This would be filling effective January 3rd, I believe it would be. Would be filling the additional sergeant position that was budgeted in 2022. Now, when I say additional sergeant, I mean there's one more sergeant than there was in 2021, and there will be one less patrol officer. So we're not adding a body to the police force, but just kind of shifting from an officer to a sergeant. So that's what this plan would be. Chris Wittenberg and his team have interviewed candidates and are recommending Brian Setner, who's a current officer of the force. He's been on the job for 12 years. 6 of those years as a detective. Will be assigned as a patrol sergeant.
So this was a vacant budgeted position.
Correct.
Yeah, 2022. It starts. This is the budget we just passed.
John?
I don't really know how I feel yet. I don't like going into a new year, putting people in a position. Because so much can happen between now and when that new budget takes effect. So I'd rather have the appointment start, have them come back at the first of the year, or first meeting, and do it. Versus now, but
Isn't there?
You're a yes, Mark? And John, you're a yes. At this time, I'm gonna say yes to move this up to full council, and we can talk about it more then.
Len, before we go to the next item, let me just back up to the city prosecutor. A related thing, just for your information, is that Don is stepping down from being the appointed judge, which is a quarter-time position, because of the mandatory retirement age. No judge can work past the year in which they return 70. Don Schwartz turns 70 on December 31st of this year. So his retirement was mandated as of January 1st. I have contacted every attorney that lives in the city of Buyouts to see if they're interested. None of them are interested. So we do not have a quarter-time appointed judge for that. I have called the head of the 6th Judicial District to notify them. And 2 things that we're going to do. One is the Judicial District will work very closely with our schools to take a look at caseloads, determine what its needs are, and do what they can to help meet his needs. That might be by sending a part-time judge from the outside here. It might be to provide clerical support. It might be to provide attorneys to do some of the work, all depending upon what is needed. So they have said we will work closely with your judge to make sure they have their needs. The other thing what I'm going to pursue, but this has to go through the political process with our state legislatures, and I'm going to start that discussion tomorrow, is seeing if we can make our elected judge a full-time judge. Now, I'm told that we're one of the few small cities that do not have a full-time judge. And that came up years ago, a number of years ago, and it was denied for political reasons. I don't know the history of it. Now, this is what I was told by the Judicial District. So I'm going to start that process with our state legislatures. But that'll be a long process. If that happens, if it happens, probably takes 6 months to a year. But I'm going to try to see if we can make that a full-time position.
So is it based on qualifications or is it the salary for the part-time judge position that no legal attorney wanted to?
Nobody wants it. I think the salary's pretty good. I mean, the salary is, you basically work, it's a quarter-time position, so you work 1 week a month, you get $50,000 and you get health insurance. It's a pretty good gig, I think.
You apply it?
One, I have 2 strikes against me. One, I'm not an attorney, and 2, I'm over 70. So that's where we stand, just so you know. There's no action to be taken on this, but just so you're aware of what's going on now, about the court system.
Those funds are paid for by the state anyway, right, the judge? Okay, thank you. I believe we're on topic F.
And quickly, just to clarify on topic E, was that going to the discussion agenda for council?
No, there was a majority, so it would be consent.
I use Mark's line, one can pull it if they want, and we'll discuss it.
I'm just trying to be sure I make a note if it needs to go to discussion, so, you know.
I appreciate that.
Topic F, Lexipol training contract. So, you know, Chris Witzenberg, Chief Witzenberg, approached Ginny and I about purchasing, I think it's about $2,000, Ginny, somewhere in that range. In the 2021 budget, it's called Wastewater Academy, which is a training solution for the police department that just really providing service training that's required by accreditation standards for shift briefing, as well as some other training. This is something that he's vetted and thinks is a really good solution that can help him out. It's offered by Lexipol, the same company that you may recall from the 2022 budget process. We included in the budget for next year a different additional Lexipol solution, which is for policy updates. So this is a little different thing. It's a training piece as opposed to the policy piece. It's something he'd like to go forward with now. If there's money in the budget for the transfer, we've made within his code. So this is something that I guess we need approval for the transfer. Why it's on the agenda.
No, we need the approval for mayor to execute the agreement.
Oh, okay. Right. The contract is signed. The council authorized the mayor.
Objection? We've been full council. That's just staying within Chris's budget, right? When you say transfer within his own budget.
He has funds available.
Topic G.
Yeah, as you know, in the 2021 budget, we had approved in the July reconsiderations a payroll upgrade. The team that was put together to research out different softwares did an excellent job. And we have narrowed it down to a company that is now called UKG. It used to be Kronos, but they merged with another company. And we would like to recommend that we contract with this company to upgrade our payroll system. And it will be a full system. It will have payroll, it will have employee-friendly access, it'll have timekeeping, it'll have HR. And we have the current funds available in the 2021 budget to cover the installation and then plus the charges for the services for 2022. So the purchase order will re-encumber those funds. I will tell you that this option is much more expensive than what we are currently paying for our payroll system. Right now, our payroll system is only about $3,000 per year with KBS. This system will be closer to $30,000 a year. So it'll be a budget reconsideration for the 2023 budget. However, this is also going to save us money in other areas. We will no longer be having to print paychecks, except for those who still get a paycheck. Everything will be online so people can actually get onto their app, go in and look at their direct deposit forms. They will also save a tremendous amount of money for us on our 1095C forms, the forms that you get that report to the IRS about your health insurance coverage. We won't have to pay for that software anymore. We won't have to pay for the filing. We won't have to print the forms. We'll save on ink. So there's going to be a lot of internal savings from having this program. But the biggest savings, even though it won't be a monetary savings, it's going to be a time saver for every department. We have done an analysis, I shouldn't say we, I should say the staff has done an analysis of the amount of time saved by every department of how much time that they put on a biweekly basis on our current payroll system. And if you were to take those costs, it's estimated out to be, over $70,000 just in time. And so that will free up staff to be able to work on other things that are waiting to be worked on in every department. It will also make it so payroll will basically be entered into the system on a daily basis, and everybody will just be signing into payroll every day, and it'll be a live system. It won't be something that we'll have to enter at the end of a 2-week cycle. It's going to have great advantages to us. Of course, we'll have a large learning curve for it, but the company is very excellent at their training and their in-service, and we've gotten great recommendations for them. And we would like to bring this to council for consideration. Are there any questions?
Go ahead, Mark.
So you said it's $30,000 per year from that, so it's every year, or is that an initial year and there's a?
Well, there's an initial startup cost, but what they do is they have a different structure in charging, in which many of the payroll systems are now doing. They charge so much per employee per month. So it really ends up being, and I'm just estimating the 30,000. So it's going to end up being based on actual activity. Some years it may be higher, some years it may be lower, but it's a kind of like a per employee fee.
And does the contract then include training and the upgrades that you need to the software?
Yes, it does. As far as I know, as of right now, that was a consideration that we asked them. The contract is going to include what they call ready time, ready payroll, ready HR, leave, ACA manager, compensation schedule. Will be able, for example, OPT will be able to put their schedule on. Police and fire will be able to put their schedule on. There will be a lot of, on the HR side, there will be a lot of in-service already done on the HR side for David when he has orientation with the new employees. It's going to bring us into the modern way of processing payroll. It'll make it much more efficient. And every department, as I said, is going to save no longer manual systems. It will be a tremendous leap forward into the efficiencies of processing payroll.
The last question then, sorry, Lynn, but contract length, how long would that be?
Normally, we start out with the company likes to start out with a 3-year contract. They said that they could do a 1-year contract for us, but I'm willing to support a 3-year contract only because we're going to have a learning curve and get some experience under our belt.
So refresh my memory. For some reason, 49,000 was sticking in my head for the software.
It was a $50,000 budget adjustment.
So this platform just by itself without the service contract is going to be how much now?
The initial the launch, they're calling it the launch, is $11,750, and then with the anticipated service for 2022, which will be about $30,000, I'm guesstimating it will be around 45 of the 50.
So year one we save 5.
Year one will save 5 from what we initially
But
did.
everything else after that.
Right, it will definitely be an increase in the 2023 budget.
So we have approximately 129, 130 employees, correct?
Full-time, but then we've got the part-time.
And part-time, right? So approximately how many employees are going to utilize Paychecks?
I'm guesstimating on an annual basis throughout the year, it'll be about 180. But that will be in total. It won't be 180 every time. So what they've done is they've averaged it out to be about 130 a month. I think that is going to end up really being a little higher. Only because I just know the paycheck fluctuation. So I'm going to guess about 140 a month.
So isn't that like another service that we should be looking at, trying to get the best?
We did. That's what I'm saying. The staff did that. We went to UKG, we went to Paycom, the staff, it was myself and Katie and Dave Corey and Brittany and Joe Temming. They interviewed a number of companies. And the price was basically, I want to say a la carte. We also looked at upgrading KVS. KVS upgrade right now is not available. It won't be available for probably 5 to 6 years. Going to their partner in Springbrook was not worth the time and effort as far as how far it was going to bring us into technology. So we already did. We looked at several different companies.
What does the county use?
The county just converted to Tyler Technology, and we cannot just use Tyler Technology for payroll. We already looked into that. We asked them, I said, can we just upgrade with payroll? They said, no, you have to take the whole package. So it would be payroll, finance, water, sewer billing, everything.
Can we share that service with them?
Can we share Tyler? Well, we are looking into Tyler Technology with a discussion. I think it was on the county's list as far as shared services. You know, if we were willing to, wanting to upgrade, I told Greg that I was interested in
It's
looking at
been
it.
removed from this year's shared service plan.
I'm sorry, Mayor.
It's been removed.
Oh, it's
The county
been-
has removed the sharing the software for financial
Okay.
financial software with towns and cities and villages from this year's plan. They said that they are not ready to be able to implement that this year. They'll reconsider it for next year's plan as an option for consideration, but it is not available to be for consideration in this year's shared service plan. The only item that is on the shared service plan for this year is the EMS service. All of the chief elected officials meet Wednesday evening to vote on that, because that requires a quorum vote for approval.
And looking into converting from our KVS system right now to the Tyler Technology, if we were to convert all of our systems, it would be, you know, overall, it would be, I want to say, over $100,000 immediate investment. And we're not in the need to convert our finance or our utility billings or anything like that. We are in need to upgrade our payroll. The system will talk to KVS, so they'll be able to communicate. We'll be able to, you know, produce computer language, so it will take the payroll information and interface it into our finance system. So that's all been confirmed.
John?
Sounds reasonable.
Scott?
So I'm good with me.
So what was the closest competitor?
Paycom was the second that we were looking at. And their fees were basically the same, a little bit different, and a little bit different approach. But they were the second one. They've got very little experience in New York State. They really have very little experience in the New York State retirement system. That was one of the biggest reasons that we decided not to go with them.
So we're not looking at the lowest bidder, we're looking at the best value.
Correct.
How far up were they? I mean, compared to the lowest bidder?
Oh, well, the lowest bidder would have been converting KVS, which would have been very little, but really getting us nowhere. So that would have just been thousands of dollars instead of the, you know, the $50,000 mark.
And it wouldn't have improved your efficiencies at all?
Not really, no. It would not have, one of the biggest things on this system itself is the time savings that it's going to give the finance department for processing year-end information, the 1095-C forms, the W-2 forms, the quarterly filings. It's also going to provide huge savings for the personnel office in employee orientation and online services for, getting all of their health records on, all their, personal information in that way. It's so it's going to benefit personnel and finance tremendously in-house and cut down on the amount of time that we're spending on payroll activities to allow us to do other things. And then it will greatly improve every department head's payroll keeping system. As I said, so we'll be getting rid of all of this manual, especially for OPT, the fire department, the police department. It will now be online live. One of the really cool things about this system itself is we can take a contract and we can program it for the whole term of the contract for the employee. So it will know exactly what date their pay change should happen, where we'll no longer have to do that on an ongoing basis. The system will do it for us. They are able to incorporate all of the union contracts, terms, and conditions within their software. So they'll be able to say, okay, the shift differential for CSEA is this, and it kicks in at this time on the time clock. But for the police department, it's this, and the fire department, it's that. It's very, very sophisticated, and it'll automate a lot of work for us.
Mark, you good?
Oh, very good.
Move that up to full council.
Okay, as you know, we went out for RFP for auditing services, and they were reviewed on Friday. 4 firms responded to the RFP, and BST was again the company that scored the highest. We had 4 reviewers, and BST scored 91.88%. Dretcher and Nolecki scored 87.42%. The Bonadeo group scored 86.48%, and EFPR group scored 79.84%. So our recommendation to the council will be again to contract with BST.
3 years or 5?
5 years.
Who were the 4 people that were reviewing?
There was myself, Joe Temming, Terry, and Dave Corey.
And is their number, could we talk about this? Is their number the same as if they had extended?
Yes. They basically bid on the same thing that they did on the extension. Now, I will tell you in full closure that BST was the most expensive as far as dollar wise, but there's many things that the evaluation is scored on. It's scored on quality and comprehensiveness of the proposal, the technical approach, the contractor experience, the staff qualifications, and the cost. All of us scored very closely with all the categories. We weren't exact, but we were all very similar.
Any further questions? Is that full council? Aye.
Okay, that's for the legal services. Again, we had 4 companies bid on it, and we are recommending that we continue our contract with Coughlin and Gerhardt. They far exceeded in the evaluation. It was, again, it was the same reviewers, it was the same process, and Coughlin and Gerhardt just did excellent on all of the scores.
So their bid came in within your budget? What you budgeted for the year?
Well, our budget is an estimate, and what they are willing to work with us if we want to set them up on a retainer for the basic services like we currently have. But all of the RFPs were done on an hourly rate, is what it was done. And some of the companies were willing to do retainers for what they called basic services, and other ones were not. But Coughlin and Gerhardt is willing to go with the same arrangement that we currently have.
What had you budgeted for the year for that line?
you're testing my memory. I want to say 25,000 for the retainer and 20,000 for, like non-legal or litigation type services, where they have to, defend in court for arbitrations or things like that.
Any other questions? With that, full council? Topic J.
Okay, the wastewater treatment plant and the water plant, they go out to bid or RFP for, no, it was a bid for laboratory services. And we had 5 bids submitted for the laboratory services, and both the water and wastewater chief operators reviewed the bids and agreed to award it to Microbac Laboratories of Cortland, New York. And that is their recommendation to the council for award. There was, they said that they met specifications, and the purchasing agent supports that recommendation. And from what I understand, they were our previous contractor, is that correct, Greg? And staff had, there were some issues that they needed to work out with the company, but the company and both department heads have approved and agreed on the areas that they needed to improve on.
And so is the new contract higher than what you budget?
No, it falls right within the dollars.
Greg, you said this is the one we're using now?
Yeah. Any other questions?
Just a full closure, I'm gonna be able to vote on this because we have, where my employment is, and I had to use their map, so.
Yeah. John? Is that item for council? Topic K.
Okay, Susquehanna SPCA contract, this is an annual renewal. They are proposing that their processing fee needs to be increased from $30 to $40. That just gets paid by the dog owner. And they also, their boarding fee is also increasing from $30 to $40. And again, we coordinate this through the city clerk's office. And I don't know if you want to speak on this, Gary. And this is an annual contract, and we just need to bring it to council to have approval. And Mayor, I tried to get a hold of you before the meeting to ask this question. Will we also need to appoint the secondary animal service for Rick Jeans?
Yeah, I don't know if we were doing that because they needed that to show that they were working with the municipality to be eligible for a grant. I don't know where that stands now.
Okay.
It doesn't hurt for us to reappoint them.
Okay.
It doesn't cost us a penny. We can use them if we want. If we get excellent service from the Susquehanna SPCA. Police department are very, very happy with the service that they provide. So it doesn't hurt. Let's just reappoint the Blue Jeans folks. Doesn't cost us a penny to do so.
So given that they've raised their rates, are you making an adjustment within your budget?
We have an estimate in our budget. It really depends on dog activity as far as, how much we end up spending. So we basically, again, just did an estimate looking back at history, and I knew the rate increase was coming. And also we seem to be having more animal activity since we've gotten our new animal control person involved. She's been going to training. So maybe we need to do a budget adjustment sometime during the year. Maybe it's just going to depend on the activity.
This is also typically a fee that's not paid by the city unless the dog is not assigned. Typically, the increased $10, that is part of the fee that's passed on to the owner of the dog that's been confiscated.
Cost us very low money.
Yeah, it is. I want to say it's like $400 a year.
Any other questions?
No. No, thank you
Was
for
that
that.
the full council? Topic L.
Okay, every year we look at the purchasing policy and we make updates to it. And we distributed the purchasing policy for you. I hope you all had a chance to read it. We had highlighted everything in red that we wanted to update. And I don't know if you have any questions that you would like to start with, or if you would just like me to go over the highlighted areas.
Start raising your hand if you have some questions. Does anybody else have a question?
I can just quickly summarize basically what we did is where it said city manager, we changed it to city administrator. And also we were trying to take some of the things off of the council's plate and put it under the city manager's control, so we could move things along a little bit faster. And for example, a quotation waiver on page 6. We wanted to suggest that the city administrator be able to approve that instead of the council. Same with the sole source.
Yeah, Jenny, why don't we go to page 5 under
Okay.
encumbered purchase orders? Why did you want to scratch out the council's approval?
Because that's already in the budget transfer and amendment policy, that it says it's council approval. We just thought it was redundant.
Okay. And then for the quotation waiver,
Again, the quotation waiver, we just thought it would be quicker to have the city administrator waive it instead of having to bring it to council. But, you know, again, if you can always change it back if you don't support it.
I'm just, how many times is that gonna come up? I mean, if you're talking about efficiencies, I was just wondering, does that come up a lot or a little, or?
No, it doesn't come up often.
I'm just trying to understand the rationale.
And I inserted the same item under the sole source.
So can you run through a scenario for the sole source? Because I was thinking about this and I just wanted to hear what you were thinking.
Well, for example, let's take Genfair. That's an easy example because it's OPT. Genfair is the only company that we can use for our current fare box system. So if we had to go out and purchase more fare boxes, instead of bringing it to council to say that we have to waive the purchasing policy for this because it's sole source, we can just have Greg do it very easily because we've already named them as a sole source company.
Well, with both Greg and Gary here, I just would like to hear from your perspective, the two of you, because I was looking at the city charter and that it's still the mayor's responsibility to sign off on all contracts. So with these changes that you're proposing, that the city administrator is signing off on, does that conflict with the city charter?
Mayor, you could probably answer that better.
Well, I don't know that it conflicts with the charter. You know, I think we all struggle with finding the right balance between having the council, elected officials approve something or having it approved by a staff person. I guess, you know, I see the value in having the council approve these things. The only reason not is if it causes a great inefficiency. Does it cause delays? Does, you know, how often this happens, as one asked. What is the reason for, I mean, I don't think the council objects to doing it or feels that it bogs them down. But what is the justification for moving it away from the council? Does it cause problems and delays? Does it cause problems and putting too much work on the council? What is the need to remove it from council? Would be my question.
Yes, I think it can cause delays when if there's a justification for waiving a clause that the department has documented purchasing agent reviews with the city administrator. I guess I just don't see, there's multiple layers of checks and balances there. The purchasing agent's job is to ensure that we're following the purchasing policy, and then if there is a waiver, that's something that he or she agrees with, the department has to provide that justification. And then adding an additional layer of somebody, previously or currently the common council reviewing that makes some sense. But that process, when it does happen, can be a month and a half process. Whereas, sometimes depending on what it might be, it could be anything that this might pertain to, the purchase of a certain material or equipment or whatever it might be. Depending on the situation, that delay could be costly or just inefficient. So I guess I see this as this is something that the council could consider delegating to the city administrator. As I think the last bullet in the city administrator's job duties per the charter is any other duty that's delegated. So this might fall under that category. I see it as an efficiency thing. I mean, it probably doesn't happen more than a handful of times a year. I don't really know, but that's just another item off the agenda that probably wouldn't really raise any major concerns, I don't think.
I guess the other question is, how subjective are these decisions? Obviously, in the case of Gen Fair, it's very objective. There's nobody else you can possibly get that service from. They're the only ones that can do it. Are there cases where it's more subjective because we've had good service from these people before, so therefore we want to sole source it, but we could get it from other sources?
No, whenever there's a vendor that's considered a sole source, they actually have to write documentation of why they are sole source.
So this is not waiving the purchasing policy.
No,
This is just, it's very objective.
yes, and also, just so you know, sole sources is also a part of the audit test. And they will see if we've got the proper documentation and proof that the vendor is the sole source. And so the purchasing agent is pretty strict about having the proof that it's sole source. We attach all the documentation we have right to the vendor file itself.
Gary went exactly where I had gone with my thought process. And I'm not thinking ill of anyone. I'm just trying to, it seems like the council's being cut out of, because this is a waiver. So you're actually asking for a sole source waiver, which means you could, the exercise of going through for BST, you could actually do that. We had a very lengthy discussion for BST, and the reason why we went through this exercise to find out the exact same conclusion of what we talked about happened. And so I don't see where it's happening so much that we're causing, we the council are causing you inefficiencies.
We went through this purchasing policy line by line, and I always look for efficiencies, even if it might not be saving us hundreds of hours, it could save several hours. It's not gonna make us horribly inefficient if we leave it the way that. Just to give you an example about BST, that wouldn't really fit this. If we wouldn't have argued that they're sole source, obviously there's other competitors, and that wouldn't be a quotation waiver because that's actually an RFP. It's a little bit a different level of purchasing procurement. Quotation waivers is specific. The word quotation is a lower level of purchase as opposed to not a formal bid or an RFP. So an RFP for professional services, $20,000 or above, we need to do a formal solicitation. I couldn't waive that. Formal bid for a construction project is over $35,000. I can't waive that. That would fall under a different category of we still need to go to council.
So then what is the cap on quotation?
Depends on the type of work you're doing. For public work, which is generally speaking construction type of project, where there's labor involved, maybe materials and some trials. Contract with the job, that's $35,000. Below that, you're required folks. If it's 35 or more, then it's required to go to a formal bid.
So your cap on this would be 35,000. And so following through the charter, we require you This is council's pleasure of giving us those reports. Or did we put that in there for quarterly? I forgot.
For
So
the,
then you could actually go through this exercise of 35,000 or less, and we wouldn't know about it until the end of the report, on a quarterly report.
If there is something budgeted in, didn't require an amendment. well, then, for whatever reason, we go to council.
Would you still require though that the council approves that the mayor signs the contract? I mean, we're still gonna have to go through council. And I think maybe that's what Len was going, I didn't pick up on that. So this doesn't, are you thinking that this gets you out of getting approval for the mayor to sign the contract?
No, this, obviously, there are not many things that amount to $35,000 that aren't involved in a contract. There's a contract involved, but still need to, like the item we had tonight, which is for $2,000, need to go through council, we approve to sign the contract. So anything that requires a contract, it still has to come. There are some things that don't require a contract, we can just issue a purchase order. Those are the sort of things.
I guess I just look at this moment where you two have in-depth experience in city government, and you're not giving me like, well, then it happens in 2020, have it boom, 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 in 21, have it multiple times. You're not actually giving any direct examples. So I'm just kind of questioning why we're changing this process.
well, again, sole source is very rare. OPT, that I'm thinking of OPT because of Gen Fair. I think they're sole source for some of the things at the water plant. For example, the SCADA system, things like that. So we don't have that many vendors that we consider sole source. But I could always discuss it with the purchasing agent tomorrow and get back to you on, how often we use a sole source. But it is rare. I want to say we may have, less than 10 on our vendor list, and we have thousands of vendors.
I'm just gonna throw this out there, because it happens, and we're hearing rare, and we've also have heard, well, if you really don't wanna do it, it's really not gonna hinder us. I say if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Why change this right now? Let's just leave it the way it is, and let's take a year and see how much we use it, and then next year, throw it back on there, and we can rehash it.
Thoughts?
Glenn, can you articulate your concerns about making the change?
Yeah, John, I think I've done that already. It's just, I'm not seeing where we're creating any inefficiencies by going through the process that we already have based on the lack of examples that are provided tonight. And so for the checks and balances, to where the council should be participating in this, that's my only concern. I just don't see where you're overbearing us. And if I was seeing where we're causing inefficiencies, by all means, I would say, let's streamline this. It's like payroll. I didn't really want to commit to the 30,000 a year, but I also remember that there's, I think, four steps that you have to go through to complete payroll. So I know that you guys, the department heads all the way through, want to have that efficiency. So we'll have to find $30,000 from somewhere to make that happen, or more. I mean, it's based on paychecks. So, which now that I brought that up, are we going to cap that off at 30 in the contract, or?
No, there's no cap. It's based on actual activity. So if we only process 100 paychecks for the month of January, then we'll only be charged for 100. If we process 200, then we'll be charged for 200.
Jenny, since most of these are contracts, isn't it one motion that we usually do? We ask the council to approve the mayor signing it and declaring it as a sole source, and we don't usually do it as just one motion. So since you're gonna have to do the motion anyways for the mayor to sign it, what do we really say?
Okay, and just to clarify, it's for quotations and lower level, and if
I
there is
was
contract.
talking about a quotation, the sole
Well,
source.
I think even in the case of the sole source, what we would only apply if it were a sole source for a product that maybe normally requires quotes, but not a bid, not a contract report.
Yeah, these two items are, it isn't for the contract, Mayor, but it's just for the procurement process of getting the quotations. So our goal is, if we know it's sole source, let's not make us go through the process of trying to get the quotations to bring them to the purchasing agent. If that's all, it's instead of bringing it to council to say, we need to get quotations on this, but we know it's sole source. And then you're gonna have to waive that we don't need to get the quotations. Then we go back and then we say, okay, now the council's waived it, so now you can give us your price because we don't have to do the competition. Then we'll bring it back to you again to award the actual contract. So it'll come to you twice. It'll come to you once to waive the quotation requirements, then it'll come back to you to award the contract.
Well, kind of along Scott's analogy, we feel uncomfortable in just leaving it the same for 22 and just denoting when it actually comes up.
Yeah,
Since we're not really giving the example.
I'm fine with it. And, you know, as Greg said, we went through it line by line, trying to look for how we could make things more efficient. We can bring it back to you again and say, look, this has happened this many times, and, you know, do you support changing it?
Thank you.
Can I add to that? We're gonna go down that route with there, just to make sure that that piece about efficiency in terms of moving things along sticks with me. I don't want to stop. If we have to get something from somewhere, it's the only place to get it. If we're holding up the entire system because we're doing all this, it seems to me that's inefficient. As we're noting the number of times, I'd like to note the times that it's created inefficiencies, because you know, that to me is a great concern. I don't want to handcuff our employees for getting things that we know we need to have from one source. So I'd like to make sure that that's noted as well.
Sure.
Then can we declare, once we declare a vendor as a sole source, do we have to then go back to council every time we purchase something from them, or we declare that the council declares them as a sole source, and then all future purchases, just, you don't have to go to council each time and say, do we need your approval as a sole
No,
source?
the only thing we do have to do though, Mayor, is to make sure that there's still only a sole source. So for example, you know, let's take OPT out of it, because now, you know, I don't think there'd be another Gen Fair vendor, but say something at the water plant that is currently a sole source. If another company then started developing that product, maybe they will no longer be the sole source a year from now.
Or maybe, what do we typically do now? Do we come back to council every time we make a purchase from a sole source vendor, or we just do it once?
We would do it once, but then we would confirm for their next order or their next contract that they were still the sole
In which
source.
case you just go ahead without.
Then we just go ahead,
So
correct.
really, the amount of times this comes to council is very, very small, because we have a very small number of sole source vendors. They're rarely a one-time purchase. And so this really only comes to them the first time you use this vendor. And then after that, it doesn't come to council for all the future purchases for years and years to go. So it really seems like it comes to council very few times. Only the first time you use the vendor. Or if you determine there's a change in circumstances.
Yeah, the only thing is with the sole source, what we inserted there as far as the bid process, that was not in there before. It was just a waiver on the quotations. So we thought if it got to the level of bid and we knew it was sole source, we then would just be able to move forward. But we can stay with the process and then bring you back documentation and a report of how many times it actually has happened.
Okay, sounds good. Is there any thoughts on page 7 from anybody? Now we'll be page 8.
On page 7, we just inserted the definition because quite often people will ask us what public work is.
Page 9 is just the attachment B, let's go there, I'll get there. The reasoning why you're scratching out the low bid versus best value contract, the town council adopted legislation in 2015. Why do we have to take that out? If we're-
It was in here twice, so
Oh,
this was just a repeat.
Top of
And
the page on
yeah.
page 9 has the same thing.
Uh-huh. And then we get to where I kind of already raised this before, is the mayor and or the city administrator may execute awarded contracts.
So in that case, if the council approves the awarding of the contract, authorizes the mayor to sign, if you authorize the mayor or the administrator, it just makes it a little bit easier if the mayor were out of town or just literally obtaining the signature.
Yeah, isn't that what the acting mayor is for?
Well, no, let me just say that George tried to change that a few years back to say that. And it was denied because you have to change the charter, because the charter is very clear in that only the mayor can sign a contract. So you can't have a purchasing agent the purchasing policy cannot supersede the charter. Because we went through this a few years ago with George, who tried to make this change. So if you want to make this change, you'd have to change the charter. The charter supersedes the purchasing policy.
But again, though, Mr. Mayor, like say you're out of town,
The acting mayor.
the acting mayor can still sign, so it's not like we don't have somebody here that can't sign. Correct.
I was looking at the city administrator portion of the charter, which allows the council to delegate authority, but if that conflicts with the mayor portion of the charter, I understand that. And ultimately, this is just about, again, efficiency, not having to track people down for signature, have other things they're doing. It's just-
I know sometimes, it's an inconvenience to track down the mayor to get a signature, and, I know that. The mayor's not always here every single day. One thing that we need to do better, and Kerry has made an effort to improve that procedure, is, I've always said there's we approve the signing of contracts at council meetings. There is no reason that those contracts can't be prepared and ready to be signed at the end of the council meeting. And that would be a great improvement in efficiency. We don't seem to be able to get there. Carrie did make an effort to do that, but I don't know if she even has access to all of she's not even given all of those contracts in time to do that. But if Greg, oversaw an effort to make sure that Carrie had all of the contracts that are on the agenda to be signed, as soon as the council meeting is over, the mayor signs them. You don't have to chase after the mayor. There's no, delays. And, I've been saying that for years now. Carrie's done the best she could, but she doesn't always have access to that.
Yeah, that's why we implemented that policy over the summer. There are other instances such as when the mayor is authorized to sign any and all agreements related to this grant or that grant. Thinking of the Boiling Creek easements, that sort of thing. But again, it's just something we have to.
So I had struck the sentence that the common council may authorize a city official other than the mayor to sign a contract. Do you want that to go back in?
Well, I think, yeah, I know what you're getting at, but I think Carrie's right. It needs to fall in line with the city charter.
The charter says clearly that the mayor signs all contracts.
Okay.
So you have to change the charter if you're going to change it. Personally, I have the perspective of a mayor only, so my perspective obviously is going to be different. But I have always found it to be a good one check and balance. And it also keeps me in the loop of what's happening. So I've always found it helpful to me that I sign the contracts, because to make sure that I'm aware of the business we're doing and things that we're doing, which I wouldn't otherwise know. I only know because of that, and it's a good check and balance. I think. And I don't think that the inconvenience has to be significant if we do a good job of planning and coordinating. But that's up to the council. If the council wants to change the charter, you know, that's certainly their right to do so.
So to answer your question, Jimmy, I always feel comfortable moving forward with the execution of awarded contracts to fall in line verbiage wise with what the charter says on page 8 under C15 mayor, paragraph number 3.
Okay.
Something to that nature. I didn't have anything for page 10 unless somebody else did, and then we're to page 11 where you struck out in sole source procurement.
We were trying to get it all into one category,
Okay.
so that way it wasn't repeated.
The travel orders you no longer want signed or issued by the clerk's office.
Correct.
Yeah.
There's no reason to put the city clerk in the process of travel orders. Travel orders are approved by the department head, and department head travel orders will be approved by Greg.
Okay.
And there's no reason for us to burden Carrie with it.
We're essentially taking it and scanning it. We have real no involvement.
So that takes one layer out, right? Okay, good. I don't think the limits on credit cards are.
No. Pardon me?
So there's still $500.
Yes, there are certain department heads that have $1,000. And if someone is traveling where they're going to be away for like an entire week, we can temporarily raise their limit to cover their hotel room, but then the credit card company knows to lower it back after that week.
So is attachment D all new? Do you have-
It's the attachment D, the whole attachment D is new. We've had people ask us exactly what best value means. So what I did is I took the law that was incorporated in August 4th of 2015, and I just made it an attachment here. So that way they can just read the definition of the law and hopefully answer their question.
I did find it curious that fire hydrants still have a standard of 1973.
I'm sorry?
Attachment B, it says fire hydrants was approved on July 3rd, 1973, so we're still following that standard.
It's the same manufacturer, the only water class, not the same exact hydrant. Not too far.
That question I can't answer. I'm sorry.
So attachment D is all new, correct?
Yes, attachment D is all new.
And you're doing this just to create and put it all in one space, right?
Yes.
What is this says local law?
The city
Is that an existing local law?
The city passed the local law for this value.
So you're just, this is not new information, this is already
Yep,
the law of the land, you're just copying it here.
yep, I just put it into the policy, so it was there for information.
Great.
But I think we're on to the administrative annual. Page 1. So we would have been looking at this in November.
It depends on when we get to it. Sometimes it's October, November, December.
So run me through the scenario of number 4 for Article 1.
That's just clarifying, throughout the manual, it refers to, in some cases, department head approval. If it's department head that is seeking the approval, they don't approve themselves. It's sort of in that case. Okay, that's just kind of clarifying in general. Many of these see in red for the document are just minor clarifications. We kind of run through the ones that are more substantial, or if you want to just go through and ask questions of the person calling you either way.
So didn't get to it, so I'm on page 3. Education, there was no comparative, so
The change there is previously, the administrator, someone subject to the administrative manual would have to complete 1 full year of service as a full-time employee prior to accruing any vacation time, at which time they accrue 10 days. Oftentimes, more often than not, when we hire a new administrative person, we're making concessions upon hire that's captured in the motion for hire that includes granting additional vacation time upon hire. And a lot of times this is because we're hiring people that aren't entry level, they're well into their careers, they're transitioning from somewhere else in the city where they may have multiple weeks of vacation, you're coming with absolutely nothing but vacations plan. So I mean, Katie could attest to, probably 3/4 of the time, if not more, we hire a new person, we're making that sort of concessions. This was something to try to capture what is our current practice in this manual and provide a little bit more of a standard benefit to those initial hires, make it a little less objective. However, there is the asterisk, which in another case, this is 10 days, that's 2 weeks upon hire. Again, with new hires, we often have people that have 3, 4, 5 weeks of vacation that are taking concessions to come work for the city. And one of the things we're able to do in negotiations is to offer an additional week of vacation. That's something we've done in several cases. So this would give the discretion to the city administrator in the negotiation process to make that offer. That's something we've done in that process anyway. Ultimately, it has to be approved by the council. This is just sort of, I guess, formalizing that. So, right, Katie, might explain that.
if you have to come to the council like you have been, and I can remember 3 or 4 times we've done this before. I think there was an individual that you had hired for your staff, but that person didn't work out, but we had given that individual extra vacation time to entice, but they still didn't come in. You're still gonna have to have the council's approval, so I guess, thank you for the explanation of the paragraph or the sentence, but the numbers up above, are they different than previous years? And that's why they're in red?
Well, we just modified the appearance of it, and that's why they're in red. The only change is, as Greg mentioned, is that they will now get 10 days upon hire instead of having to work a full year. And then the other change was you used to have to work 12 years to get 20 days, and we changed it to 10 years. That's really the only 2 changes in this entire area.
What was your reasoning for why you decreased that line by 2 years?
That was
We
my.
had somebody leave because of that?
No, that was my suggestion, because I thought that when we get, again, when we get established people here and they, we're used to getting 4 weeks a year, and now they're coming here and they're only going to get 2. And then we say, well, you've got to work 12 more years before you can get another week. I just thought the time span was too long. And with the amount of recruitment that we've been doing and the amount of competition that we've had in recent hires, I just thought it made more logical sense to structure it this way.
Is there any thoughts from the committee on this chart?
Just one quick thing. Part of the rationale you're talking about now is there's a bona fide 1 month of vacation or 20 days of vacation that a person enjoys in their current job. What if a person should come and say, I'm of age now, I need more time, I want more time off to take this position. I'm very qualified, I have. But if you ask me for a bona fide about how much vacation I'm getting now, well, I'm not.
Well, there would be a negotiating,
In other words, negotiation could still be open for additional vacation.
You mean after they're an established employee, John? Is that the question?
They're coming in, they haven't worked for 2 years, they have no current employer. but they're used to having more time.
Sure, and that situation has actually happened where we've had people who were excellent employees who were self-employed, but they also, by nature of their self-employment, had a lot of flexibility in their schedule. So, you know, of course, trying to tell someone that they had absolutely no time off in the first year when you're recruiting someone to a director level
Mhm.
position, whether you're coming from a better benefit
Sure.
from an external employee or self-employment, whatever. I mean, again, it provides a little bit of a tool for us to try to attract top talent and be competitive with our, you know, in the ways we can be with our private sector competitors.
So that the amount of time off the person can have is a negotiated item as well as a right.
Well, it's something that we've used in the past few years, especially just, you know, again, as private
I think it's
sector
fine.
salaries have crept up. I mean, ours have not. I mean, not saying that I think we're not, I think we're paying people fairly, for the most part, but, you know, again, I think it is, as Len mentioned, there have been several motions that I brought to you where the council has authorized additional vacation time.
Mhm.
You know, Greg mentioned about 75% of the hires. I would suggest it's even more than that. I think that there's only been one administrator that we've hired, I don't know, probably in the last 2 years, that didn't seek some sort of concession because they were leaving a job with a better benefit to come here.
Sure.
What's the financial impact of that new structure for 22 and then maybe 23?
I don't think it would be a financial impact at all, because they would still be getting their annual salary. It would just be, they would have more time off. So it would be, you know, I haven't costed out by, you know, each person, because it wouldn't be any more dollars out the door. It would just, they would just have access to more leave time.
Well, I would agree, it's not a financial impact, but it's an operational impact. You know, every time we want to do more for people, we often hear we don't have the staff to do that. Obviously, you know, the more vacation time we give, the more short-staffed we are, the less we can do to provide services. And probably in the, maybe there's a financial impact in the fire department where they're covering people who are on vacation with overtime.
This is just for department heads and like,
Well, there's 30, 31, 30, 30,
Yeah,
31.
this
No,
is,
that's right, this is just, I'm sorry.
I just want to make sure I wasn't on.
No, you're right. You're right.
yeah, this is for the non-unionized employees.
Yeah, I take back what I said up front. I don't take back everything I've ever said.
How's the rabbit hole? Okay, so really no financial impact on the new structure of number 2.
There won't be any additional payroll costs. It would just be an increase in paid leave time.
Right. The
It
only
would
time it's
only
gonna-
be for that between the 10 and the 12 years.
Right. But it is gonna get somebody, is it gonna more days if they retire?
No,
They punch the ticket?
no. They would, well, let me clarify that. They would accrue it faster because now instead of being at the 12-year mark, it'd be at the 10-year mark. But for them to finish their career, if they were a 30-year career person, it would, their termination benefits would be based on the same calculation.
So you were at 25 days before, at
Yes,
24 years?
yes. As I said, the only 2 changes in this entire presentation
Was the time.
is the hire, initial hire, and then 12 to 10 years.
Is our vacation time, use it or lose it, or people can get paid for it?
They are allowed vacation buyouts. If you're 1 to 10 years, you're allowed to buy out 1 week. If you're over 10 years, you're allowed to buy out 2 weeks. And you also get maxed out at
50 days.
50 days, yes.
So there's not a significant expense in paying the buy.
A significant
I'm
expense.
saying, so there's not a significant expense that we incur paying for buyouts, is that correct?
Well, it depends on, currently no, because we've had some of the people who really utilized the vacation buyouts, they have retired. So that expense has gone down quite a bit.
I have a question, Katie. In the past, we were required, maybe that's changed, to have an annual meeting with the administrative staff to discuss changes to the administrative manual. Is this a result of such a meeting?
It is not, and actually, there was never a requirement that there be a meeting because this is an unrepresented group and we have to be very careful to not negotiate with unrepresented employees. But there is a section in the manual that says that covered personnel are encouraged to communicate suggestions and recommendations to improve the effectiveness of this manual to the city administrator, city manager. So there were some staff in the past, Mayor, who interpreted that to mean we need to have an admin group and we need to bargain against the city for what we
No,
want.
it wasn't negotiation.
It was not right.
I think it may have even been in an old administrative manual. I think and the old administrative manual, I think used to say that it was right in the manual that the administrative staff will meet annually with whoever. I remember I met with them the first couple of years.
You did.
And I think it was right in the manual, and I think it was taken out of the administrative manual.
I believe you're correct, Mayor, because it was actually taken out at my suggestion
Okay.
because I was very uncomfortable negotiating with a
No,
non.
I don't disagree. I don't disagree, but I was just trying to recall.
Well, what-
process.
right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I just got one question, Katie. I don't know how this would impact, but I'm looking at the numbers and how we go down through and do the vacation time. I was just wondering if we could get to 5 weeks a little bit quicker for our staff.
Get to 5 weeks a little bit quicker.
Yeah. Instead of going out to like 24 plus years, it's 5 weeks, but
We're willing to consider anything the council is willing to approve, I suppose.
I just didn't know how much that would impact. That's, I guess.
Well, and just so you know, this is similar to all the other contracts, correct? It's after the 20-year mark, it's 1 day per year until they get up to 25. So this is consistent with CSEA, fire, police, and sergeants.
I think, Scott, of course, we like to provide benefits to folks, especially people who have been with us for a long time, but we do find that the longer and longer people have been with us, the more and more time they accrue, and then they're not able to use it. So, really results in automatic buyouts. And really, the whole benefit of vacation time is that we want people to take a break. We want you to step away. It's not a badge of honor to not be able to walk away from your workload. I mean, there is a work-life balance, and that's an important concept and something that we all really have to embrace. So I think that, to your point, I think that while the employees would appreciate that, I don't know necessarily how well it would work on an operational matter, because they already are accruing more time than they practically can use in a year and still do their jobs effectively.
Okay. I'm just curious. Thanks.
They can accrue up to 50 days.
Yes, sir.
And by passing this chart, you're getting 2 years, that's 10 days, really, all the way through.
It's just a thought. I didn't say it was a good thought.
So on page 4, the reason why we're putting the word vacation in there is it wasn't before. It's just normally when we've done it in the past. The old language is there and it's struck,
Oh,
and then new language is introduced, so you can understand the comparison.
the reason we incorporated vacation there is because this is the vacation section. So we didn't want people to interpret it as leave time would cover holiday and personal and whatnot. So this is just the vacation section.
Okay.
I think it's important to mention, like Greg kind of said in his preface, that this is the first time in a decade that the manual's been scrubbed. And Joe actually took a lot of time to go through. Joe Tommy did. You did. And he reviewed the manual, literally line by line, page by page, just trying to make any, language updates, and it hadn't happened in a long time, which is why you see way more,
Well, actually, Katie, it's not really accurate, because this manual was completely rewritten from scratch by George 2 or 3 years ago. Yes, it was a brand new, the purchasing manual was brand new, completely redone under George.
so it's the admin manual.
What's that?
This is the
Oh,
administrative
brand
manual?
administrative manual.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
You take that back now too. You took that. I appreciate it.
You switch so fast from one manual to another.
I still haven't heard you take it back though, actually.
I
So again, to my point,
take it back.
appreciate that.
I take also back anything bad I ever said about you,
You've never said anything bad about it.
which is true.
As I was saying, Joe took a really hard look at the entire document, went through line by line and
You
just.
guys went through it. I just jumped in at the end.
Okay.
Okay.
And that's why there's so many changes. That's all I gotta say.
Yeah, and it was a team, and, but Joe really did, as Katie said, he did a very thorough job. So, but we had a team, all of us went through it several times. We met several times, tried to get the language so it was consistent and logical. And on page 4, you'll see a lot of red, but basically what this is doing is just clarifying what's already in practice and making it more clear for application.
And so Greg, from your chair, you're approving all of the department heads, whatever times they want to bring to you, correct? Is there a paragraph in here that says that you're doing that?
As far as vacation requests? Or
Whereas it says on page 4 that the vacation buyout, yeah, G, upon approval of the department head, an employee may sell, blah, blah, blah. I just don't see where you're approving of the department head's time.
right, that's that first page, number 4 of the edit. So in the case where the department head is the one requesting the time off or whatever request they need, it normally would be approved by the department head in that case, city administrator.
I just want to be sure.
Yeah, that's what there were a lot of instances of that, so the blanket.
So the only other page 5 that I had was number 6, travel during absence. I just want to throw this out there that if the employee has treatment that's in Boston or New York City,
Then obviously that would be something, so this, it says that the board may rely upon the following reasons. So obviously medically related travel to and from, a remote location would not be something that would be cause for somebody to be denied. It would be if a person were to say, I would like to take my sick bank time and recuperate in Honolulu, then obviously that would be something that the sick bank board would take into consideration in approving the application.
I just want, does the word personal handle that situation or not? I don't want employees to look at this and go, seriously, I can't travel. And then they gotta go talk to Greg, I need to actually go to Boston and New York City for.
In this case, it wouldn't be me, this would be the sick bank, which would be
The
the
board.
administrative group, so I would be involved in that. Yeah, I think what Katie said, having the word may, this is just, it leaves some room for discretion for the board there. It's just generally indicating that some travel during absence could be something that the board could consider.
Or if an employee has a member of the family die, they're not gonna be allowed to travel to go see them, or they have to go back to the board, to the sick leave bank board to get approval to go to the bereavement travel.
I think it would be.
I definitely understand the Honolulu thing,
Mhm.
but if you're on sick, if you've had to borrow time from the bank, you have a relative that passes and you want to go to the bereavement, under this, you wouldn't be able to.
No, you might not be able to, I mean, depending on the situation. I mean, the whole concept behind this is treating donated time sacredly because other employees are working very hard to accrue that time and then donating in good faith with the expectation that it is then used in good faith. So of course, if an employee were to have a specific situation like that for bereavement or some other, unexpected circumstance, that would never be anything that we would rely on and to disapprove an application or even discourage the person from going.
Is the increments of 160 hours, that's different than what we had before? For section 8,
Correct.
what was it before?
Normally, if they got awarded up to 480 hours, they received the award right away.
Oh,
And we
okay.
thought it was a better practice to do it in increments.
So I'm on page 9, is article 8, dental and vision insurance. The paragraph number 2. Did we eliminate something or did we just add?
No, we did, we just clarified it. Currently, this language was very specific as far as the policies that we had and how the retirees were able to get access to it. The current situation now is that the insurance company takes it over for the retiree and the city no longer gets involved in it. So that's why we just cleaned up the language and made it more simplified.
I think to Lynn's point though, I mean, there's been no changes in post-employment dental or vision benefits. The offerings are the same. It's just the way that it's administered now. We're not really involved the way we are with health insurance. When an employee retires, they're provided information to contact the CSEA Employee Benefit Fund. Administrators are guests on that plan, and then the Employee Benefit Fund works directly with the employee to allocate the plan, identify, et cetera. And there are plans above and beyond what we offer to current employees that are available to retirees. So that's why it was left a little bit more broad. So when we say provided access, it just means we're providing you access to the information to get the plans if you would like to do so.
Taking anything away from any of the future retirees or retirees. Gary, complaint. Is there a financial impact for page 10, section 3?
Section 3, nothing that we're not currently doing. So for example, if say the public works director, we wanted him to have a license and certificate to for a CDL or some like a certain license for the water department. We are currently reimbursing those now. We just made it very clear here.
Right, because we've done this several times where we're offering stipends. So does this help or?
this isn't for stipends for additional duties. This is if we,
No, folks that go out and get their certifications with their license. I think the water treatment plant, we've done one, right? An individual worked hard, got their license or certification, so we had to, I just want to make sure that this language coincides with that work that people are doing.
Yeah, this is more for people who are doing, that have a license or certification as part of their job description. Not just saying that we'll reimburse that. And then it also goes on to say cover a person who are not required to maintain such a license or certification, but do so in their employment, and it's, you know, a benefit to the city in some way, such as a CDL, or they might be, because we don't have enough people for a certain task in a day, they might be assisting with that.
Dave Hotelling would be a good example. He has a CDL to drive the bus.
Sure, no, I understand. What I think Carrie was getting at is if Carrie wanted to go get a CDL, you're not actually going to pay for her CDL license, but she doesn't actually need it to be your city clerk.
I don't know, you might, because we need bus drivers. I mean, that'd be
In that case, you would be stipend, because it's well outside of the document, but yeah, sure. We're not gonna be giving a stipend or a certification, you know, sending someone to school for something that has nothing to do with the city.
I guess I had to bring up the personal cell phones here because I was like, oh, that's kind of low. Not that I can remember, it must be handled at some other level, but I can't remember having this issue come before me in the last 2 years, but the cell phone, personal cell phone, probably a little low, to be perfectly honest with you. Didn't know where you can get a cell phone for $200.
Previously, the manual did not provide any benefit for a personal cell phone. So we were adding it in just commensurate with the other costs. I mean, typically what we're seeing is phones that aren't completely destroyed, but cracked screen, things like that.
Right, but there's city staff that are using their cell phone, their personal cell phone for the benefit of the city, correct? And you've identified extra language in red in the first paragraph that basically you got to prove that you did it on the job.
And that it was not negligent.
It's just that, okay, so it's on the job and all you're gonna get is 200 on a $600 or $800 phone. If they're using it for the
Well, I
benefit of
would
the
ask-
city.
How could you, I mean, it says here that something to the effect of that you must demonstrate that this was not negligence by the employee, but the item was actually being used and broken through their work. How can you break a cell phone in a course of your work without being negligent? I mean, you don't break a phone by talking into it. I mean, you break a phone by dropping it or hitting it with something.
Or it slips out of your pocket as you're getting up into a vehicle and
But slipping it out, I mean, I would call slipping out of your pocket as being negligent. I mean, that's because if I drop something, whether it's out of my hand or out of my pocket, that's my negligence. So I can't imagine any way you could break a cell phone in the course of normally doing business with it.
The example that we were relying on there is our public safety chiefs, who are both uniformed officers, and our deputy chiefs. And, you know, so theoretically, our police chief could be tussling with someone. He's a uniformed officer, and in that case, it was only fair that he be provided with a benefit for, you know, some sort of replacement if the phone were to be damaged in that situation. I mean, of course, most situations, I would agree with you, will be the result of negligence, but to provide no benefit where a phone, like any one of these other devices, could legitimately be, you know, damaged.
No,
Or,
okay, I can see that.
Mhm. Also noted, Mayor, of course, you know, by the addition of the language, we do intend to scrutinize these if requests come in. And
It just because if your phone falls out of your pocket, or even if you're fighting with somebody, I mean, you're not using the phone in the course of business. So the thing that says has to be used in the course of business.
Mhm.
If it's in your pocket while you're working, it falls out of your pocket, no matter what you're doing.
Mhm.
It's not a result of you using it in the course of business.
The stipulation is that you're using the cell phone in the course of business, is that you're in the course of conducting business when the phone is damaged. Correct. It's a slight.
Similar to a wristwatch, or another medical device.
I think of it this way, talking on the phone, you're walking, and you just hit a patch of ice, and you're trying to catch yourself.
Well, I guess my point was, Gary, that we're kind of utilizing, to the benefit of the city, a lot of employees and their personal cell phones. And so in the course of business, yes, great, they're not gonna physically be talking on the phone to make this clause active. It's just that this is the individual that uses their cell phone to the benefit of the city all the time. And if it does slip out of their pocket or comes out of the holder and something that sustains heavy damage, I just look at it, $200, I guess maybe you go over to the box store on Southside and get one. I don't know, we can get one for $200, to be perfectly honest with it. And if it doesn't happen that often, and you put the additional language in there, I think it's gonna be hard pressed for someone to invoke that, but
You're saying you want more in there?
can you buy a cell phone for $200?
I'm gonna have to defer because I don't buy myself.
And then I'll ask John, can you buy a cell phone for $200?
I'll have to ask the guy in the corner.
Mark, what
Well,
you
it
thought?
becomes a very messy thing, because if somebody has an 8-year-old cell
Right,
phone, I mean, we wouldn't be spending $1,000 because they're gonna be due to replace it next year anyways. On the other hand, if somebody has a 6-month-old cell phone that they just paid $1,000 for. So this is a very messy thing.
what are you thinking over there, Mark? It's messy.
Mayor made my point. I'd say we're approving this for 1 year, is that correct? And so we let it ride for 1 year and reevaluate next year.
No way, we've never done that before, Mark. You said, deja vu already. Didn't take but an hour to get there.
Just a question, 13, is because it says hiring base range is all in red, so does that mean every base range now has been changed, or?
So clarification from last year, this year, is the way hiring. Previously, it said max, min, or min max, or it was a base range. It didn't really clarify that it was a hiring base range. We did change the amounts somewhat so that there weren't overlapping base ranges. What are now 5 grades in the A category general. Previously, there were 6 grades, so we just kind of shuffled things around. No one has been taken out of the category or out of the range by being moved around in the schedule, which just kind of made it a little bit more clear what the differences are between grades.
So it's no longer a hiring range, it's now.
It's now a hiring range.
It's now.
Meaning that, so let's say if you look at A1, someone is hired at $45,000 and they progress through the scale, or let's say they're hired at 50. And then they go to the next year, and as you see at the bottom of the page, where you go to 51. Previously, the way it was written, you would stay at 50, you wouldn't get a raise that year. So this would just clarify the language basically, the way we wrote it to make sure that it's understood that you're still getting that range. The hiring range is 40 to 50 for an A1 based on your experience and qualification.
I understood where this was going, so for me, the next question is, what's the financial impact?
There's no changes.
You're giving everybody $1,000.
That is what that has historically been since the grid was created.
So has somebody been denied because the sentence wasn't in there before?
No, no, nobody had reached the max yet, from last year. Yeah, it would have been the case this year if we didn't make the change.
So then someone is going to receive some financial benefit from that sentence.
Well, no more than any other administrator.
I don't believe, in my understanding, or in my opinion is, our intent wouldn't be to not give someone an annual raise. It's not asking them to raise, adjusters and so forth.
It's not a range for the position, it's a hiring range, right?
Right, it's a hiring range per position now. So if you're hired within that range, then you move on toward this currently, $1,000 per year. And also like that.
And what was it before?
Before, the way it was worded, if you're at that, that's your position range. So if you hit the max, you hit the ceiling, you don't go.
Until you get longevity.
So that was a position range before, I thought that was always meant to be a higher range.
Well, and that's what the intent was interpreted by a number of people. That's why we decided that we needed to change it.
Okay, so we shouldn't, but it was always going to be a higher range, not a maximum that you can make once you're hired.
The previous grid, there was a footnote on it that said, once you, you were to receive $1,000 per year until you hit the max. And we wanted to take that out because other people had interpreted that it was a hiring range. And that was the way it was being treated upon hires.
Okay.
So we needed to make this more clear as far as what the actual practice was being.
My recollection when created, it was always meant to be
And
range for hiring people, not a cap on how many people can make once they're hired.
so we made this more logical and we made it so it would not, one step would not overlap into the next step or to the next grid area.
Well, Gary, to your point, then, if we were looking at this schedule and we used Greg's example of A1 accountant there, and we hired him at $50,000 before this tonight, what would happen to that individual next year in 22?
Yes, I would go up. This was a
Based
This was
on-
a guide for hire, this was created as a guide for hire that you could offer, if I recall correctly, maybe I'm mistaken, maybe a couple of other mistakes. That this was a guide for hiring, and you could use your discretion based upon somebody's experience and qualifications to make a hiring decision within that range.
And Mayor, that's why we needed to clarify it and to clean it up. So it was, it would represent what we're actually doing.
I don't think we ever intended it to be a salary cap for position. I don't know if we treated it as such.
It has not yet been, no, because nobody was close enough to the cap to worry about it.
Back to my point. How much of a difference in her salary, Jim's salary is going to happen in 22? Before this schedule, before we were approving this, what number does she see different?
I don't see any difference. First of all, I wasn't at the max. And second of all, it was $1,000 annual raise since this grid has been created. So there is no financial change for any of the administrators with this new language.
I just thought we've been hiring a few people that were at the max.
Yep, correct. This year, there was one hire at the max. If we did not change this, then, and it still said max, we would have had to clarify again how we were going to address it.
Okay. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but in the last 2 years, I know that we've hired folks closer to the top end of their range, which means maybe not in 22, when 23 or 24, 25, they're going to be.
That is probably a accurate statement. Did I look at those in detail? No, I only looked at where people were for in 2021 and where they were going to go in 2022. We only had one person that was going to be at the max. And that our intent was not to hire that person at the max and never let that person advance forward. That was not our
Actually, I'm
intent.
confused now. Just don't like that, but, maybe we changed this last year, or the year before. But a couple of years ago, didn't our chart say that there was a salary range? And the city manager or the department head, I think it was city manager, could propose hiring somebody within, based upon their qualifications and employment history, up to 25% above the minimum.
It was
25% above the minimum.
It was 15%, and yes, Mayor, it did, the old chart used to say that upon hire, the city manager had a 15% leeway from the minimum.
Okay.
Yeah.
And now, okay.
And then when you actually did the math and you looked at it, sometimes that would take them above the max. So depending on where you were in the
So we
chart.
changed that a year or two.
Yeah, so that's why we needed to clean this up.
Okay. Right.
Because when you actually applied it to real practice, you ran into hurdles.
Okay. So this is correcting the change that was made. That can work perfectly.
I don't want to belabor this, but I'm just seeing the difference. So if we go up the page, it says specifically. We're negotiating your pay raises right now. That's what we're doing.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Article 4 compensation. Page 2. All employees covered by this manual may receive a salary increase, which will be determined and authorized annually by the county council action pursuant to appendix B. I don't know what it said before that. We don't have the whole language.
It just said pursuant to the salary group. It was something like that.
Okay. But in essence, by adding the annual adjustments will be $1,000 unless otherwise approved by the council. In essence, we're negotiating $1,000 a year once you reach max.
Oh,
Longevity.
that was the basic language in the previous chart. It was $1,000 otherwise approved by council. And the only reason it's in red, because before it said until you hit your max, and we took that out.
So this language is there except for what you just said.
Correct.
I just want the full council to know that that's what we're approving right now, is that we're negotiating with administrative folks. 31 of it.
Well, we're not negotiating. No.
It's not now because we just got to clarify, so.
Yeah.
And then we are up to item N.
Step. I'm hoping you're gonna ask my question for me, because I'm kind of in a predicament. I'm like-
He's in a predicament. So he's asking, the city clerk is the only department head at A2 and all the others are start at A3. Greg, is there a reason for that?
These salary ranges were established a few years ago. Initially, they've been adjusted now, like we said earlier, to not have overlaps. I think they were established at that time based on salary surveys and market conditions at the time. I wasn't involved in that process, but That's my understanding. These are just how the positions fall as far as the.
I'm just, reason why is when I work with department heads, I'm going down through and I'm just checking off between department heads, your professional and your administrative. That seems to be the only position that falls in A2, and all the other department heads start at A3 and above. And I understand what you're saying. This was before you. Yeah, I mean, I'm just kind of looking. To me, this whole scale just doesn't make sense to me. It seems like it's outdated. It seems like it just needs to be gone over, researched, and put back in. I guess is what I'm trying to say.
I believe that was done last, was it 2018, 2019?
You know, there's a science to creating these kind of. And you take a whole number of factors involved. Usually the factors that are considered are the number of employees that are under that person, the total budget that that person oversees, and so on. The risk to the organization that that person's responsibilities pose if it's not done well. I mean, these things, there's a science to creating these. They're not just done, out of thin air. So, it wouldn't hurt next year to, apply, a formula to, once again, update it, because they do have to be updated periodically because jobs change. But it is something that is not just done subjectively. I know I've gone through this myself, and often what you do is you bring a consultant in, who objectively does this, through a formula, and they have various things that each worth a certain number of points. For example, the size of the budget may be different number of points than the number of employees that report to you, the amount of risk, all of those things. So it's a complex thing that we can't just, sit around talking about, in our opinion. Maybe something next year.
I know, because I've been on that, where you have to come up with these matrix. I've been on that before. I'm just saying, we might also find out the otherwise when we take the size and stuff of our departments, these could get adjusted down.
Sure, absolutely. And probably it should be done every certain number of years.
Okay, when did you say this was? 2018.
George was here, I believe, 2018, when this was the last. The ranges were actually initiated, I think there were ranges prior to that.
So next year would be 5 years, which would be
Appropriate.
a good time to do it.
Who's the chest, does that go on?
That's me.
Could you start initiating that so that we can find out how much it's gonna cost us to do that research?
Certainly.
Thank you. I'm assuming that the MOA is for one individual,
It is,
and we don't need to mention their name unless you want to go into executive session.
it is based on a situation that came up with actually two individuals, Len, but it would affect any person in the firefighter title who would be hired under similar circumstances.
Oh, yeah, I was thinking of an individual that was hired a couple of years ago that might have fit into these parameters, but I think it says it had to be on or after August 1st, 2021. So that individual wouldn't have been applied to. So I just want to make sure that we're not leaving somebody out.
It would be. Yes, well, that would be the permanent hire date. So okay, so where this is coming from is that we had folks who were hired temporarily. And per the established past practice of the contract, those people were employed temporarily for extended periods of time, meaning that I think it's the individual you're probably thinking about, we're talking about the same person. that person will now work for us for over a year and not accrue any paid time off and not receive a pay adjustment for over a year because the individual was appointed temporarily. So what I'm looking to do is just effectively recognize that temporary service for the purposes of pay adjustments and vacation only, not affecting any other seniority that's negotiated throughout the contract, shift bidding, stuff like that. Just to not treat any employee unfairly who accepts the job in good faith. I mean, quite frankly, temporary employees are a huge benefit to us. It's kind of a risk for the employee to take the job because there's no real promise of full-time employment. It would be a full-time permanent hire date after August of 2021.
Okay. So you said 2 people?
It currently would affect 2 people, one more than the other, but I think ultimately for fairness and equity purposes, I think any person who's hired temporarily and they serve in a long temporary appointment, whether it's months or a year, should be eligible for the same concession.
Any questions?
I have one, Len, I was very under number 3, it said December 8th, 2021. I would like to modify that to be December 22nd, 2021, and that would just be the next day after the council meeting, just because we want to be clear that we're not going to be owing anybody any retroactive pay based on this. So anybody who was hired and would be affected by this would have their pay adjusted if they were qualified for it, effective after council adoption.
Question? Is that full council? Down to the additions to restriction reserve fund.
During the budget presentations, I had shared with the council my predictions on how the water, sewer, and general funds will probably end up at the close of the year. And at the time, I said that with water and sewer, I did not want to suggest moving any funds from the unrestricted reserves to restricted. But with the general fund, I'm predicting that the net increase in our total fund balance is going to be, our total unrestricted fund balance is going to be a little over $1 million. And in looking at that prediction, I'm thinking that to tie it into our 5-year capital plan and all of the different projects that we would like to be reserving for, I would like to suggest that we reserve some funds from the unrestricted to the restricted. And I had provided an attachment previously to the full council during budget, and I think it was also provided to you for this meeting. And the recommendations are to add $150,000 to the highway equipment reserve, $150,000 to the public safety reserve, $100,000 to the streets and sidewalks reserve, and then to create 2 new reserves, $257,500 into a parking type reserve, and $100,000 into the IT reserve. The reason I would like to create 2 new ones is, one, we've got the paid parking plan that we're going to be working on, and we thought that the sale of the Deep Street lot, because it was a parking lot, would be a good source to establish a foundation to implement paid parking, because once we get there, we will need to buy some equipment and things like that. So we thought that this would be a good foundation to start it. And the $100,000 for the IT is, I think, is a good preparation, because one, we will need to be recabling the public safety building, and we will also need to be replacing a lot of computer hardware in the future. Some years it's very expensive when we have to replace the servers. They only last a certain number of years. And just having these funds set aside for these specific purposes, I think, would be a good long-term strategic plan. So I would like the council to consider this. If they choose to, they want to wait until, have it as a July reconsideration, we could also go that approach. But I feel comfortable to put this recommendation in front of you now.
You're saying $1 million is basically coming in from the different line items that you didn't cap out and or sales tax, correct?
Yeah, different revenue sources, yes.
If we were using some of our reserves to make it so that we weren't pulling as much out.
We will be using our restricted reserves this year. And that is why I would like to replenish them. It is estimated that our restricted reserves will go from 4.9 million down to 3.7. And I would like to replenish with the opportunity that we have in front of us.
Jamie, let me ask you a question. I always did a little bit of look at these things. Not that my luck is right, but this is basically taking $1 million of our fund balance and setting priorities of how we want to spend it. So we don't know what's coming down the pipe. Let's say 6 months from now, we find out we get to West Highway grant. And we have to come up with $100,000 or more. I mean, $1 million or more to of our own money in order to make it happen. We're basically saying now that we're going to take $1 million and our priorities are going to be for other things, putting it into the public safety, putting it into parking, putting it into whatever it may be. Should we be waiting so we're only putting $100,000 of this into the highway reserve. Should we be thinking, is there something that's a higher priority than these things that you're mentioning, such as Lettuce Highway, which everybody has said is a very, very high priority? Should we be waiting before we say that maybe some of these other things are a higher priority than spending that whole $100,000 on Lettuce Highway?
Well, I think also before we get to this point, the money won't actually be here until the end of the second quarter of 22. I mean, generally, you tell me you don't clean the books up until the second quarter, the end of the second quarter of the next year end. So realistically, we shouldn't be looking at this until then, because you won't know definitively.
I will not know definitively, but I feel very comfortable with the amount that I've presented to you to consider. But as I said in my introduction, if you prefer to wait and have it as a July reconsideration, we can do that.
My approach is always, which I have said, is particularly in hard times when money doesn't flow easily, there's tons of it. I'm always hesitant to put restrictions upon ourselves when we don't have to. In other words, we have this $100,000 that we feel we can spend out of we can take out of fund balance. We want to, at this point in time, delineate restrictions on ourselves on how we're going to spend the $100,000. I mean, $1 million, how we're going to spend that $1 million, as opposed to waiting and seeing and give ourselves the freedom to decide as the year goes on that yes, we want to spend $200,000 in public safety. Yes, we want to spend this much on highways if a big opportunity comes for us highway. I just always question why we're going to, if we decide we have $1 million that we can afford to take out the fund balance, why put self-imposed restrictions on that in advance and not give ourselves the freedom to decide how to prioritize using that money?
Well, one reason, Mayor, is that we have a 5-year capital plan with many different objectives in there. The reserves that we have set up currently tie into that 5-year capital plan. So when investors are looking at our budget as whole, when bond counsel is looking at our budget as whole, I actually have to provide them the 5-year capital plan, and then they look to see how we plan on funding it. And if they see that we've got $2 million of public safety projects, and I'm just throwing numbers out there, and then they look at our public safety reserve, they'll say, okay, they're stable, they're planning, they have long-term planning, they know how they're going to finance this. But if we have the 5-year capital plan and everything is just an unrestricted, they will say their interpretation, and I'm speaking as if I was sitting at the table, I would say, well, they're not doing any planning, they're not doing any long-term reserves for all of these projects that they want to finance. They just have one big pot, which will end up being much too large as an unrestricted, because you have to remember that our fund balance policy is 35% of our annual expenditures. The state has accepted that, they haven't questioned that. So I'm trying to keep the numbers within the policy, and I'm also trying to show that the capital plan has funding for future projects, not all of it, and I also want to try to, as I said, we're using over $1 million in reserves this year. I just wanted to try to get that level back up.
My question is, if that's the thinking, if I look at the capital plan in the next few years, maybe I'm wrong, but my recollection is that the biggest numbers of expenses are on highway. Whether it's West Street or River Street or West Broadway or Lettuce Highway. But yet we're taking the smallest amount of money, only 100,000 of that million, and putting that towards highways. So how is that showing we're putting money aside consistent with our capital plan when the biggest amount of money needed is for highways and we're putting the smallest amount towards highways?
Are you talking highways as far as streets and sidewalks, Mayor, or are you talking highway as far as highway equipment? Because the highway reserve is for the DPW equipment, and the streets, and then the streets and sidewalks reserve is for the streets itself. And
Towards the streets.
Yeah, so how much are
Yeah.
you putting towards streets and sidewalks?
Yeah, that was
Your
100,000.
still
Yeah.
works.
Yeah, so your analogy still works, yes.
Okay, well, I just need to.
Yeah, but also that has 1.5 million in it already. That's why I was suggesting that we only add another 100,000 to it, because we're allocating 80,000 in the 2022 budget. So I was just looking at the numbers, trying to restore the reserves somewhat back to where they started at the beginning of the year. That was my logic when I was looking at the numbers.
Jenny, could you say that again? The restricted fund was 4 point what? Or the two numbers that you gave before?
It was almost 5 million. It was 4.998, and it's going to be 3.795. So the net change is about 1.2 million. So I wanted to replenish 757,000 in reserves. But as I said, if you're not comfortable, if you want time to think about it, we can do it as a July reconsideration. We can do it after the
I guess I'll go first. I don't feel comfortable in doing this, kind of along the lines of Gary, but also we're utilizing restricted funds to get to the 22 budget that was passed. And we're put on $304,000 a hole for July 1st. So since this money realistically won't be on your books until the second quarter of 22, for me personally, I would just rather wait at least until the quarter 2 starts, and then we can take a look at this and see if your predictions are coming true.
Well, and I just wanted to emphasize that when you set up reserves and when you say that we're using 300 and some thousand for reserves for the 2022 budget, that's the purpose of them. So we're setting those funds aside to be able to purchase any of those in those categories. So that is a good practice in your budget when you've got those big one-time items. If it's for our public safety reserve or streets and sidewalks reserve, those monies are set aside for that specific purpose. And by using that in your next year's budget, that is a good practice. But you have to be careful on how much you use at a time. You don't, that's why when we talked about it before, I don't like taking huge chunks out of it all, consistently. When we need to, yes, but I don't like to deplete it too quickly. I would like at least a 5-year plan for using the reserves, if not longer.
I hear you. I just think back to the 1.6 that was bought or used for one-time purchases in 2020 that was approved by the council for us. And then for us to get through COVID, we used close to 2, correct? And then the ARPA, we're not allowed to use the ARPA funds to replenish that, so.
No,
What do you
no,
think we
in no, in
used through
COVID,
2020?
no, in 2020,
To get through COVID, what do you think we?
the general fund, fund balance changed by, it was 400 and some $1,000, it decreased. Most of that was from the restricted reserves. The unrestricted reserves only changed by like $5,000. As I said in the annual report for 2020, even though we had almost $1 million loss in revenues, we saved over $2 million in expenditures. So the unrestricted fund balance in net only changed by about $5,000. It was only the restricted reserves that we used for purchases of equipment. So we survived 2020.
Like $405,000.
So it was, you know, it was, we did an excellent job in getting through 2020.
And in 21.
2021, as I said, I believe the unrestricted reserves for the general fund is going to go up over $1 million, but the restricted reserves, if it is all spent, will be using about 1.2 million. Most of that is from public safety.
I'd kind of go along with the mayor and Leonard saying, I would put this off and revisit it.
And that's fine.
John?
It's just a matter of time. It's not a matter of money changing, it's just the whole profile changing. So it doesn't seem to make much of a difference whether we decide on it tonight or at the council meeting. We'll give ourselves a bit of time.
Well, Jim, I'd like to give you an opportunity to give a reason why you think it's important that we do it now.
I think because the reason I would like to do it now is because it puts our unrestricted fund balance back in line closer to the 35% for year end. And it replenishes the restricted reserves because we used so much during 2021. But again, we can wait on it if you're more comfortable waiting. And I just want to remind you of the budget discussion when we were talking about using the unrestricted reserves. The council was very resistant in doing that, but they were receptive in using restricted reserves when we needed it for a specific purpose. So to make it better received when we need to purchase an ambulance or we need to purchase a DPW truck, if we know the funds are set aside for it because we've planned for it, it's better received than to say we just need to take it out of the unrestricted fund balance.
Well, I don't think taking it out of the unrestricted now is the right reason to do it, is because the council doesn't want to take money out of the unrestricted to spend that money. So if we take it out for a reserve now, then it's an easier sell to get them to spend it.
Well, no, what I think it is, I don't know if I want to say it's an easier sell, but I think it's easily more understood that those funds were set aside for that specific purpose. And as I said, it's, pardon me?
Sorry, I'm saying that I think it's understood that you planned for this expense.
Yes, we planned for them, yeah.
For that reason.
Yes, and I just think it's easier, more easily understood. That it was, we were thinking long-term, we were thinking how we were going to fund these different expenses.
Is there any harm done? I guess my question is there any harm that you see done by waiting?
No, I don't think there's any harm as long as we understand that the 8 million where I think we're going to end up, I think we're going to end up around 8.5 million unrestricted reserves at the end of the year. That's going to be a large increase, and as long as it's understood that we want to reconsider restricting some of that later on in the year. What used to happen years ago is that when we did close the year, then they would come back and say, let's make this retroactive. We're going to reserve these funds as of 12/31, but it would be an April motion. That made it very difficult financially on reporting purposes, because then I had to retroactively adjust the books and the cash was not in the proper locations. So it just made my job a little bit harder. I'm trying to get away from doing it retroactively. So that's why, since I've been here, I like to present it to you in November and December to consider it. So I have everything in line for 12/31. So if we go forward, what I'll do is, if we do it in April, or if we do it in July, or if we do it next September, I'll just make it effective for 2022 and not 2021. I just don't want to do it retroactively.
I know, I have some thoughts about the street sidewalks. I mean, 100,000. It's a lot more than that, just a big line. So I think just postponing this until April 1st, because it's over time. Okay, so we'll table that until April 1st. You need to talk to us about the sewer rates, public hearing.
Yeah, as I did for the budget motions, I informed the finance committee that these would be appearing on the council agenda. They're mandated, for example, for all the budget motions that were presented at council last time. I had informed the committee that they would be there, so you weren't surprised. I want to do the same thing here. I want to make sure that you understand that we will be having a public hearing on the sewer rates, and not that you have to do any action. I just don't want you to be surprised when you see it on the agenda.
Okay. There's a public hearing on the sewer rates on the 21st,
On the 21st, yes. Correct, Carrie?
Correct.
even though it's already been passed.
The sewer rates are subject to local law, so it requires the approval of the council, and then a public hearing, and then a signature by yourself.
So was it just an oversight that we didn't do it at the same time with the water?
The water is passed by resolution.
And that's not a public hearing. So if it's basically done by local law, then that means it's really like a mayor's public hearing before I
Yes.
sign it.
Yes, that's exactly what it is.
Right, so I could be able to not sign it. Public hearing.
You certainly could.
That would be a twist.
That'd be going on with me.
Didn't say I was going to.
Just remember that things need to flow down.
Yes, I just remember what Ben Norton said on the honeymoon. One thing I learned working in the sewer, be kind to the people you meet on the way up, so you're gonna meet the same people on the way back down.
I can see what's in it. Moving on to topic Q. I think this has got to be the longest agenda we've ever had. Unless for the 12 minutes still.
You're only off by a little.
This is, motion to approve, or to appoint a new motor equipment operator. This was not originally a motion on the agenda, had a supplemental item because we just kind of had a provisional offer accepted by a prospective employee, and obviously being down people, we'd like to get them in as soon as we can. Start learning the ropes and be able to help us out in our operations and all that. So this would be one of the vacant position on the streets.
Full-time vacant budgeted, 31,767 CSU grade 6.
Question?
Effective December 22nd. Yeah.
Very good. Move.
I'm sorry, did you say?
Topic
R? Okay. Every year we adopt the city fee schedule for the various charges that we have throughout the different department heads. We weren't able to finalize it for your review tonight, but we would like to get it to you by the end of the week and then have it as council discussion on Tuesday so we can make them effective January 1st. This is
I
what.
just think there was something on it that Gary brought up last year that we were gonna adjust. I was just trying to think of what it was.
Yeah, Gary brought up the parking ticket for snow removal and
That
the
was something
handicap.
parking in front of the hydrants. I don't know. I forget which one it was.
Yes, so, and that's already gotten incorporated.
Sure.
But basically, we've already talked through our different budget discussions. OPT bus fares will be increased, the ambulance fees will be increased. We're implementing hopefully a charge for the ID machine that the city clerk's office got. You know, and there's just a few others that we would like to bring to your attention. Part of our 2022 action plan is Greg and I want to meet with each department to thoroughly review everything that's on this list. I would like to do a cost analysis for the services to see if it's a reasonable price or if it's just a application price that we have on here. So what we would like to do for 2022 right now is bring it to you next Tuesday for the ones that we are definite about.
And then how are you identifying for the paid parking that we're potentially moving forward with?
Paid parking will not be on here yet. Well, I shouldn't say that.
Will we be able to do an addendum to it?
Yes, well, let me back up. Their parking ticket fees are on here, but that is for violations. The paid parking that Greg and I want to research would be more proactive than punitive. So it would be some parking permits, it would be, you know, those type of parking fees, which we're not ready to present, and that would be part of our overall.
The council can set fees and change fees at any time without resolution.
Yes.
Obviously, we'd like to do it all at once when the recurring annual fees, but there could be a discussion and a motion.
And I'm sorry if I didn't understand your question.
Yeah, that's what I meant. I just want to make sure that we're going to be able to move forward.
Oh, absolutely. You can vote on this every month if you want. If you need to add a new fee, change a fee, all it does is take a motion.
Is there anybody objecting to having the fee schedule set up?
I will be on discussion with them.
Conflicts to put?
This is just an informational item. You'll recall our ERCDC compost grant. We purchased composting equipment that Seward's and gravel in partnership with the city. They're operating a site. Part of the grant requirement is for the city and Seward to enter into a climate mitigation agreement for that site. So that essentially means that while this equipment is being used, the site's being funded by DEC grant. The life of the equipment, which is 10 years. So we're committing to using the site for that purpose.
This is over.
The grant.
This is over on Seward's Sand and Gravel, right? Dave Buyouts. So we're just committing that we're going to utilize this equipment in that parcel of land for 9 more years. Seward.
City-owned equipment being operated on Seward's property. DEC grant comes to the city.
Right.
There's this connection that's needed to be made.
For 9 years. Didn't we do it all last year? I thought we did.
Yeah. We've been doing this. We have a lease agreement for the equipment use.
The full council.
And that one, to be clear, doesn't need to go to council, so some informational.
Oh.
I confirmed that, we weren't sure, I confirmed Dave Murphy today, based on the original motion that authorized the mayor to sign. All documents related to the grant, this falls into that, so.
I just wanted to symbolically forget Gary, because he's the last one on the list.
What goes around comes around.
You wanted to talk to us about street lighting?
Well, Roundhouse Road is an anomaly in that it's a private road that is not only open to public use, but it is the only way for the public to access certain businesses and services. So Ed May, a few years back, purchased a piece of property that had an abandoned building, on there, it's otherwise vacant. And in the last couple of years, after the zone money built out a real center of commerce on that property. There's Miller's World daycare center there. I think there's a gym there. There's Tuning Mooney's is located there. And there's a storage unit. And I don't know. So there's a lot of commerce going there. And the only way the public can access that commerce is through Roundhouse Road. And there are no lights on Roundhouse Road, so it's dark, particularly this time of year. It's very dark. People are coming with their children to go to daycare. He had asked, there are NYSEG poles along the road. He had asked if the city could install 2 lights, the LED lights, near the entrance, on the 2 poles near the entrance. You know, David has said that it would require a council motion to approve it because it would be installing lights on what is technically a private road. The cost to the city would be negligible, be very, very small. I support this because there are the general public using it, the children using it. It's the only way to access these services. So David said that we could do it, but it would require a council motion to install these lights on public, on what is technically private. I'm bringing before the council to see if that's something you find agreeable.
Can those lights be added into the night mode? Right? Is that possible or no?
Essentially, yeah, that's how we would try to include it in that contract. We need to get full attachment agreements that aren't currently in place. I say that takes a while, but if not as part of the construction project, we could add them later as part of the maintenance agreement we're going to enter into. We have entered into tonight, but there's unit pricing for them to come in and add additional lights. That would come out of our annual budget.
What is the cost of lights?
I would have to check that. I don't have that number. What that includes.
In this particular case, it's not just that one parcel that would reap the benefits, it's all of the businesses that are down there. There's 3, 4 other small business owners that are down there.
The road is owned by the IDA, so it's not even a private entity, you know, that owns the road. The IDA could close that road. They own it, and they could blockade it and close it. They allow use of it so that people can access the businesses that are on there. It's a very unusual situation.
Yeah.
John or Scott?
I'm at work too. I'm also curious though about the possibility if I have a private entity or IDA actually closing the road that would cripple those businesses.
They could. I mean, it's their road, and you know, people bought those properties knowing or should have known that they have properties that are landlocked that do not have access. I mean, do not have access to a public road. I imagine if it came down to that, there would all be kinds of all sorts of legal action, and it would wind up in the courts, and who knows how it would end up. It's a very unusual situation.
Is there any role the city can play in terms of facilitating a right-of-way agreement here? Or is that not something that the city is involved in, that usually done by these private entities negotiate with the idea?
I don't know that we want to have a right of way agreement, but we want to have a responsibility for that road, especially from the
Typically, I guess my approach, if the developer, whatever the case may be, a new road is proposed, I would say the city, typically a developer would build the road to the city standard and then they would take it over to be an agreement. It's not built to city standards now, there would need to be some significant work done before I would recommend.
We basically don't want any part of it in the current condition.
Yeah, it's been, the first section of it's been improved and paved, but some basis will affect the rest of it.
What hopefully will happen is when and if and when, hopefully it's when, the IDA does have tenants who want to build on that road, which is the plan, that the IDA will build out that road, which will be a very expensive project, to city staff. And then our message to the IDA is not that we're committing to writing it, but our message to the IDA has always been that if they build that road up to city specs, we would take it over. Which makes sense because, I mean, if they do get tenants there, it's good for the city. It becomes a good economic growth for us to maintain that road would be only common sense.
It is messy, Mark, because I think water's near the road, sewer's on the
Yeah.
back, and gas is also near the road. I don't know.
Yeah, but the lines and the
It's very messy. So to help out, several businesses on this road would be good.
I don't have any objection. I'm trying to figure out how to take this a step forward and be able to make sure that we don't have a situation where they might get kind of landlocked, but as you say, perhaps that's on them. This is an important area for the city and make sure that it stays that way.
I think we'll get the full council.
Privately owned businesses there are paying taxes.
Oh,
No personnel
yeah.
there.
Oh, Jenny?
May I ask 2 questions?
Yeah.
Can you repeat again what Dave Merzick said about doing the work on the private property?
He said that if council approved it, that he would have no problem of us installing the lights on that road.
And would there be any reason that the IDA would not install the lights?
You can ask them.
Just
I
curious.
mean, I don't know if the IDA will be involved in it. I mean, the IDA installing lights on city poles and how those would be metered separately. And I don't know if what the practical.
It wouldn't be city poles, they're nice, they won't poles.
City.
Right, on private property, which they are similar to, I don't know, there's probably many examples. On Chestnut Street, maybe even the Vets parking lot, I believe has an area light that's mounted to the pole. There must be an annual fee that those private businesses pay, and I say to have those area lights, they call them, I suppose, street lights that are illuminating private property. So it'd be similar to that. They would have to work out directly with NICE, just a little bit different scenario.
Full support from this committee, full council, sorry. Okay. Moving on to the executive session. Who's calling for that?
Well, if I could mention one other that wasn't on the agenda, because we're at C, might as well review.
So we've already meet?
No. All right. I wanted to mention the West Street pedestrian safety signage improvements. We'd like to proceed with first thing that we need to do a budget amendment for approximately $10,700, I believe. And in addition, the city council only accepted a gift from Harvard College that agreed to contribute $6,000 toward the cost of these signs. So that will be on the agenda next time. So I don't think anyone had a problem with, you discussed it, but just wanted to make sure you're aware that's being on the agenda.
Harbrook has agreed to voluntarily pay for half of the cost of installing those flashing signs.
Thank you, Harper College.
Greg, just to confirm, the total transfers will be 12,360.
Okay.
Is there anybody objecting?
Just needing to work.
Sorry, did you say it's staying?
Yes, yeah, because I'm employed by Arctic, so
That's fine. I just-
I'm the vice president's office, so I'm directly involved.
I just wanted to- Thanks.
Sorry, I didn't speak up loud enough.
Rick, did you say it more?
That's all I have, I believe, sir.
There's some personnel matters to go into executive session.
Yeah, so personnel matters to discuss employee performance.
You did it.
Right here.
You're
It's
back
a
on the record.
Cinderella joke. There's no hearing that.
Now.
We back on, you said?
Yes.
I got it.
So I have a motion,
Yeah.
sure.
I have a motion to